It was one of those quiet mornings when the world feels softer than usual. The kind where you hear the hum of your own thoughts between the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn. The light came through my curtains in thin golden lines, striping the kitchen table and catching on the steam of my coffee. That's when I saw him, David, out by the fence. He was bent over, trimming the hedge that divided our yards, his shoulders moving with that slow, practiced rhythm men get when they've done the same job 1,000 times. I'd known him and his wife, Claire, for years. Barbecues, Christmas cards, the usual neighborly small talk. But lately, I'd seen him alone more often than not. Claire had taken a new job that kept her away, sometimes overnight. I don't know what came over me that day. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was the ache of too much solitude. I waved. He looked up, smiled, that kind of smile that's polite but tired, and I heard myself saying, "David, would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." He hesitated, like he didn't want to read too much into it, then nodded. "Sure," he said. "That sounds nice." When he stepped inside, the air felt different. It wasn't romantic, not in the way people might imagine, but there was a stillness between us that made every sound sharper. The clink of his cup, the scrape of the chair, the sigh he let out before taking his first sip. "I don't usually do this," he said, glancing around my kitchen. "Sit and have coffee with someone who isn't Claire." "I don't usually invite anyone," I said. "Guess we're both doing something new." We laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from understanding something unspoken. Outside, a breeze caught the curtain, letting in the scent of wet grass and morning. He told me about his job, how retirement was on the horizon but didn't feel real yet, how the house was too quiet when Claire was gone. I nodded because I knew that quiet too well, that kind that hums in your bones, even when the TV's on. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "You ever feel like you've become invisible? Like people see your age before they see you?" His voice was soft, but it hit me like a confession. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines on his face, the wariness in his eyes. And for a second, I felt that same invisibility lift, as if he'd spoken it for both of us. "I too," I said, "more often than I'd like to admit." He smiled, and there was something almost grateful in it. The clock ticked on, and neither of us rushed to fill the silence. We just sat there, two people sharing coffee, realizing maybe it wasn't loneliness that had brought us together that morning, but recognition, the quiet relief of being seen again. When he finally stood to leave, he touched my arm lightly, almost absent-mindedly, and said, "Thanks for the coffee, and for talking." After he left, I stood by the window, watching him walk back to his yard. The air still smelled like coffee and rain, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not between us exactly, but inside me. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was something I hadn't felt in a long time, alive. The next morning, I told myself it was just coffee, that it didn't mean anything. But meaning has a way of creeping in through the smallest cracks, doesn't it? I tried to go about my day as usual. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, even called my sister to chat about nothing in particular. But every so often I'd glance toward the fence, half expecting to see David there again, trimming the hedge like nothing had changed. By afternoon, I gave in to the thought that had been tapping at the edge of my mind. I baked a loaf of banana bread, the kind that makes the whole house smell like warmth, and carried it out to the back porch. I didn't plan on seeing him, not really, but fate seems to favor those who pretend they're not waiting. He was there. Of course he was. Bent over his flower bed this time, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. When he saw me, he smiled, easy and genuine. "You're going to spoil me," he said, when I offered the banana bread. "Maybe I just wanted to return the favor," I said. You helped me remember I'm not invisible." He blinked, like he wasn't expecting me to bring that up, then nodded. "You remembered that, huh?" "I did," I said. "I think about it more than I should." We sat on the porch steps, sharing slices of warm bread, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed like a slow river, smooth, comfortable, familiar in a way that felt rare. He told me about his daughter who lived in Seattle, and I told him about the years after my divorce, when I'd forgotten how to sit quietly without feeling lonely. The light shifted, golden and soft, the kind of light that makes even ordinary things look tender. His hand brushed mine when he passed me the plate, and though it was the smallest gesture, it lingered between us like a quiet secret. "I don't know when life got so complicated," he said finally. "It used to be simpler. You met someone, you built a life, you just kept going. Now it's all second-guessing and silence." "I think," I said slowly, "that we spend half our lives learning how to hold on, and the other half learning how to let go." He looked at me then, really looked, and there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Not longing exactly, but recognition again. That same sense that we'd stumbled onto something that didn't need defining to feel real. A breeze rustled the leaves, and the smell of rain returned, faint but familiar. He sighed and stood up, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "You have a way with words," he said. "You ever think about writing them down?" I laughed softly. "Maybe one day. Right now, I'm just trying to live them." He smiled, that same gentle, knowing smile from yesterday. "That's harder than it sounds." Before he walked away, he turned back and said, "Claire's home tomorrow. She'll want to thank you for the bread." And just like that, a small wave of reality settled over the moment. Soft, not bitter, but grounding. I nodded, feeling both grateful and uncertain. When the door closed behind me, I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain start to fall again. I told myself it was just coffee and conversation, nothing more. But deep down, I knew something was shifting. Not in a scandalous way, but in the quiet space where people rediscover parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. Maybe it wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about remembering I could still feel. The next few days passed in that in-between space where nothing seems to happen, yet everything feels quietly charged. I didn't see David, though I heard his mower on Saturday morning, and once, when I stepped outside to water the plants, I caught the faint sound of his voice over the fence, warm, easy, talking to Claire. It should have made me feel relieved, maybe even comforted, but instead there was this ache I couldn't quite name. I wasn't jealous. It wasn't that. It was more like I'd glimpsed a different version of myself through him, one that I wasn't ready to lose sight of yet. On Sunday afternoon, I found myself walking to the local farmer's market. The air smelled of ripe peaches and roasted coffee beans, and the square buzzed with quiet weekend life. Old couples holding hands, families with dogs, a few teenagers playing guitar on the corner. I was turning over tomatoes in my hand when I heard someone say my name. "Didn't expect to find you here," David said. He was wearing a faded blue shirt, the sleeves rolled up, a bag of apples under one arm. "Well," I said, smiling despite myself, "I didn't expect to be found." We ended up walking through the market together. It was harmless, really, 2 neighbors among a crowd, but every step seemed to hum with unspoken thoughts. He bought me a coffee, and we sat on a bench beneath a big oak tree, watching the world drift by. He talked about Claire again, about how her work had her traveling more these days. "We're fine," he said, his voice careful, almost rehearsed. "It's just, life changes. You start to wonder what's left when the kids are grown, the house is quiet, and the days start to blend together." I listened, nodding. "Maybe that's when we start noticing what we've been missing," I said softly. He looked at me for a long moment, and the air between us seemed to still. The sounds of the market faded, the laughter, the chatter, the music, and all I could hear was the faint rustle of leaves above us. "You ever think," he began, "that maybe we meet certain people just to remind us of who we are?" I met his gaze, feeling the weight of what he wasn't saying. "All the time," I whispered. We didn't touch, didn't lean closer, didn't cross any lines, but something passed between us just then, a quiet understanding that what we were sharing wasn't about romance. It was about recognition again, that rare spark between two people who'd lived enough life to know how precious it is to be seen, truly seen. When we stood to leave, he smiled faintly. "I'm glad you invited me for that coffee," he said. "I didn't realize how much I needed to talk, how much I'd stopped talking." "Me too," I said. "Sometimes I think silence can trick us into believing we're fine." He nodded, then stepped forward, and for the briefest moment, placed his hand over mine. Just that, no more, no less. A gesture full of gratitude, not desire. Then he turned and walked away, blending into the slow rhythm of the crowd. I sat there for a while longer, the paper cup cooling in my hand, the world moving gently around me. There was no guilt in what had happened, no secret to hide. Only the quiet realization that sometimes people enter our lives not to change our circumstances, but to awaken something we'd long forgotten, our own aliveness. That night, I stood by the kitchen window again, looking out toward the fence. The lights in David's house glowed softly, and I could see faint shadows moving inside. I thought about how easily we can live next to someone for years and never truly know them, and how sometimes a simple cup of coffee can open the door to everything we've been missing. The days that followed carried a gentle rhythm, quiet but alive, like the soft hum of a string just tuned right. David and I returned to our routines, our polite nods over the fence, the occasional brief chat, but there was a subtle change in the air. Neither of us tried to push it, name it, or even define it. It existed in the pauses, the shared smiles, the way a breeze through the trees seemed to feel different when we were both outside. One evening, I found myself sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of apricot and rose. David's lawn glowed golden in that light, the edges of his flowers catching the sun like tiny bursts of fire. He appeared quietly, holding a small tray with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I thought we could watch the sunset together," he said, setting the tray down. I smiled. "I'd like that." We sat in companionable silence at first, letting the sky do the talking. As the colors deepened, I felt the same sense of recognition I'd felt on our first morning together. Not romantic, not forbidden, just real. It was as if we had stumbled into a secret understanding. 2 people who had lived, loved, lost, and survived, finding solace in someone else who could see them fully. "I keep thinking about what you said," he began softly, "about how life reminds us of who we are through the people we meet." I turned toward him, catching the hint of vulnerability in his gaze. "I think that's the truest thing," I said. "And I think it's rare. Finding someone who reflects back not just who we are, but who we've almost forgotten we could be." He nodded, his hand brushing mine lightly, almost absent-mindedly. It was a touch that carried no expectation, only presence, the kind of human connection we all need when the world has grown quiet around us. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel entirely seen, and I sensed that he did too. It wasn't a story of passion or secrecy. It was a story of understanding, of shared humanity, and the quiet courage it takes to be open to it. We talked long into the evening about memories, regrets, small joys, and even about the future, not in a way that suggested anything would change between us, but in a way that made it safe to hope. The sunset faded, leaving a violet-blue hush across the sky. Our cups were empty, but the warmth lingered, as if the world itself had paused to acknowledge this small, profound connection. When he finally stood to leave, we both knew there was no need for grand gestures. We didn't need more. A soft smile, a gentle nod, and the shared understanding that our lives were now quietly intertwined in a way that mattered more than words could capture. That night, I lay in bed reflecting on the days that had passed. I realized something essential. Life doesn't always deliver the dramatic awakenings we read about in books. Sometimes it gives us subtle shifts, quiet moments that remind us of our own worth, our capacity for connection, and the importance of noticing, really noticing, the people around us. I had invited my neighbor's husband for coffee on a whim, thinking it was just a cup shared across a kitchen table. What happened instead was a gentle reminder that even in later years, we are still capable of discovery, still capable of being seen, and still capable of feeling alive. And in that soft realization, I found a peace I hadn't known I'd been searching for. It wasn't about romance or scandal. It was about human connection, the kind that leaves its mark not on a story of love, but on the quiet resilience of the heart. Some mornings, I still make coffee just in case the world decides to surprise me again. And sometimes, I glance at the fence and smile, knowing that even small acts can open doors to unexpected and unforgettable discoveries.